Few players in history have reached the level of genius. Players like Messi, Ronaldo, Zico, and Garrincha are examples of athletes who have reached this level, and along with all of them, Ronaldinho Gaúcho, a soccer star, who performed wizardry with the ball on his foot. Few players have been as good as he was, a player who reminded us that this sport is not just about competition, but also about art, and this he did effortlessly. There is no better example of soccer art than Ronaldinho Gaúcho. What about that smile? The typical player who had fun on the pitch, and no matter what happened, he would always be like that. But when we look at that smile, we can't imagine the size of the difficulties he went through to shine at Barcelona. What Ronaldinho went through in his childhood is something that discourages any child. Yet he continued, but why, he will answer that question. In this video, João de Assis Moreira was the name of Ronaldinho's father. He worked in a shipyard and also played for local club Sport Clube Cruzeiro. One day, little Dinho came home, and his mother, Dona Miguelina, who was always smiling even at the worst of times, was crying. Roberto, Ronaldinho's older brother, took him into the bathroom to keep him to himself and said, "Dinho, there was an accident. Dad died." Ronaldinho, my father told me years later, to abuse his creativity on the pitch and to play with the ball. Before the accident, Roberto started playing professionally for Grêmio. In an interview, the father of the two boys said, "Roberto is very good, but just wait to see the youngest." It seemed that he could see the future of his little Dinho who lost his father and his hero. At the age of 8, he suffered a heart attack and fell into a swimming pool. This story changed Ronaldinho's life forever. He didn't like to talk about it because he always wanted to remember only the good times with his father. Like when one day his father lined up several chairs next to each other and he and his brother had to try to dribble. His father said that above all was the fun, the joy, the freedom, and the message behind it. Father, and that was transmitted by Ronaldinho's body. When we see him smile, we see Dinho and his João smile together. Ronaldinho Gaúcho was undoubtedly soccer's greatest charm. He continued to play soccer and loved playing with his friends, especially his brother Roberto. At that time, he was already a great promise at Grêmio, but he got injured and had to move to Switzerland. As time went by, Ronaldinho's plastic and daring style improved, and he was accepted even more into Grêmio's youth team. Ronaldinho later recounts that one of his coaches told him that he would never be a great footballer, because according to Ronaldinho's coach, he only had technique and didn't understand tactics and couldn't adapt to the coach's orders. And above all, the memories of his father's words still came back to him. Play with freedom and have fun on the pitch, and that's what he would do. On July 19, 1994, Ronaldinho was on a trip with Grêmio's youth team, and there he saw the Brazilian national team beat Italy in the final and win the title after 24 years. Dinho remembers seeing everyone celebrate the victory. No one talked about anything else. Brazil had stopped, and Ronaldinho saw Romario, Dunga, Bebeto, and other stars become world champions. "I wanted to be like them. I wanted to bring joy. I wanted to play as well as them. I'm going to play for Brazil." Ronaldinho was inspired by players such as Denner, Maradona, and Ronaldo. At the time, all these players were known for their beautiful and charming soccer, which was exactly what he wanted for himself. In the same year as the World Cup, he received his first U17 call-up. The day he arrived at the national team's headquarters and went to the restaurant, he saw framed photos on the walls of Zico, Pelé, and Bebeto. At that moment, Dinho realized that he was eating in the same place as those geniuses of the ball. He was in the same place as players who made the world stop to watch them play, and that was his dream too. He realized that it was time to abandon Dinho and follow Ronaldinho, but without losing the joy and innocence of his childhood. Ronaldinho's debut in a competition for Grêmio came in the Libertadores Cup in '98 against the future champions of the tournament, Vasco. But in that game, Grêmio won 1-0, and the young 18-year-old prospect played well in that game. At the time, Grêmio's coach was Sebastião Lazzaroni, who already saw enormous qualities in the player, even telling the club's president that we were looking at a player who would be the best in the world in the future. The youngster had already proved his worth long before in '97 when he scored 2 goals, one against Austria and the other against Germany, in Brazil's U17 World Cup title campaign in Egypt. In the same Libertadores, on March 31st, the team went into halftime against Chivas at the old Olympic Stadium with the score at 0. But it wasn't long before the ball was rolling in the second half that the young attacking midfielder put his talent on display. making it 2-0 to the Selección U17. Grêmio. Brazil was seeing a new Ronaldinho emerge at the time. Ronaldo the phenomenon was already shining at Internacional, already had 2 golden balls, and was known to the public as Ronaldinho. The little was starting to shine in Porto Alegre, and everyone was talking about a little toothy boy who was emerging in the south. But in 1999, Grêmio would face Internacional in the final of the Gaucho. And if there's one thing we all need to understand, it's that no Grêmio versus Internacional is just another game. On one side, we had Ronaldinho, a young prospect in soccer at the time, and on the other, the 1994 World Cup winner Dunga. In the first game, Inter won 1-0, and in the second, Grêmio won 2-0. Dunga commented that Ronaldinho was a bad tackler and that there would be a change in the decider. But in the third game, 1-0 to Grêmio, the team was that year's Gaucho champion. But what Ronaldinho played in those games was absurd in an unprecedented way. Dunga was put in his pocket in a shameful way, and without caring about the pressure or weight of the rival, Ronaldinho played a lot and scored a great goal after dribbling Anderson and tabulating with another player and shooting the goalkeeper Andre. Ronaldinho applied perhaps one of the most disconcerting dribbles Dunga has taken in his career, including a perfect dry hat that didn't even give the midfielder time to try to run back to stop him with a foul. Ronaldinho finished that championship with 15 games and 14 goals. Years later, the star spoke with his characteristic good humor about that very remarkable final. "I would have liked to give Dunga a lot more dribbles. He got away with it. I practiced those dribbles. They were already reserved for him. Those dribbles had an address," the star said. That he was a fan of Dunga and that he even had his own sticker in his album. A few days later, he was on one of the most successful programs in Brazil at the time, he and his teammates, and during the program, he was called up to the senior national team. He had been called up and he found out about it live. Ronaldinho even suspected that the show's presenter was lying, but it was true. On the day of his presentation, everyone only had one question to ask him. It was going to be Ronaldinho in the national team. You or Ronaldo the Gaucho? He answered simply, "He chooses his and I'll stay." Ronaldo showed the Gaucho his golden balls and other awards and told him what it was like to live in Europe and compete in those championships. Ronaldinho was speechless when he saw that, even at his young age, Ronaldo was already absurd. Before the Copa America began, Ronaldinho had given a performance in a friendly against Latvia on June 26th at the Arena de Baixada, where he started as a starter in the shirt, providing a perfect cross for Alex's first goal of the game. Brazil won 3-0, the other goals coming from Roberto Carlos, who hit the ball hard towards the goal. He was a reserve player wearing the modest number 21. The team's debut was against Venezuela, and Brazil won easily 4-0. It was then that Vanderlei Luxemburgo finally decided to put Ronaldinho on the pitch, and in his first official game in the Brazilian national team shirt he did so, exemplifying how everyone felt at that moment. Ronaldinho showed that he wasn't just another player. He wasn't another Ronaldinho. He was Ronaldinho Gaúcho with his own identity and a natural talent beyond compare. Brazil won that game 7-0, but despite the media and fans asking for him to be the starter, Vanderlei Luxemburgo preferred to leave him on the bench. Ronaldinho watched from the bench as Brazil beat Mexico and Uruguay. Still in 1999, Brazil went on to play in the Confederations Cup, in which Vanderlei couldn't hold Ronaldinho back. He took over the starting lineup and scored 6 goals, making him the top scorer in the competition. Even so, Brazil were eliminated by Mexico. Vanderlei Luxemburgo didn't like Ronaldinho's attitude. According to him, the boy already thought he was a star, which is why he was again reluctant to call up the young promise of Grêmio in the qualifiers. In 2000, the Olympic Games were terrible for Brazil, who went out in the quarterfinals to Cameroon. Ronaldinho said at the time that it had been his worst disappointment in his career, and of course everyone at the time wanted to win a gold medal at the Olympics, because until then, no one had managed to win the title, and that was the only prize that the Brazilian national team hadn't won at the time. During this period, Grêmio received an offer of 80 million reais from the English club Leeds, but the Grêmio board turned it down because they thought Ronaldinho was worth much more. Grêmio tried to capitalize on the star's image between 1999 and 2000. The team wasn't strong enough to fight for major titles, but the players' presence alone was the reason. For the stadium being packed, shirts and much more were auctioned off. More boxes at the Estadio Olímpico were sold, and the team's matches were televised, and even scratch cards were sold with the star's image. He was the idol not only of the Gremistas at the time, but especially of the youngsters who identified a lot with the player's simple and cheerful manner. But at the end of 2000, all that romance began to crumble as the Brazilian press began to warn that the renewal of the player's contract would be tense because of a new law in Brazil that would come into force in 2001 and would allow athletes to negotiate their own passes without depending on the clubs. Grêmio thought about sending a letter to the president of the republic at the time, Fernando Henrique, asking for the law to be brought forward so that they could sign Ronaldinho to a new contract. But there was no way Ronaldinho could sign with any club without Grêmio earning a single penny. Several clubs wanted the player, including PSV, who years before had already taken Romario from Vasco and Ronaldo from Cruzeiro. PSG also wanted to sign him. On January 18, 2001, the club announced that it was negotiating directly with Ronaldinho Gaúcho, without even talking to Grêmio, as his contract would end in February and the new law would come into force in March. The fans began to fear that the player would leave, in addition to projecting a tremendous financial disaster for Grêmio, which had turned down superior offers the previous year. The club tried to shield itself and put up a banner in the Olympic Stadium saying, "We don't sell talent, please don't insist." But this was to no avail. PSG had managed to convince Ronaldinho to go to France, and Grêmio was left without its star player. The fans' feelings changed and they began to hate him, some arguing that Ronaldinho had been ungrateful. Before he became famous, Grêmio had given the talent and his family a house to live in, but Grêmio gave it to Ronaldinho's brother so that Roberto wouldn't go after another club. So it had been a relationship of interest on both sides. What matters is that he still decided to go to Paris in 2001. Ronaldinho moved to Paris Saint-Germain. Grêmio filed a lawsuit with FIFA and managed to get $7 million for the star, which ended the story. But Ronaldinho was still unable to play for 6 months. Because of this, when he arrived in Paris, Ronaldinho wanted to be different at the time. The low cut was fashionable. He learned where the city's main parties were, gained friends, and realized that absolutely no one in Paris could pronounce his name, Ronaldinho Gaúcho. So they decided to call him Ronnie. When he was finally able to play and go to training sessions, he realized something. This wasn't Brazil. He didn't have the same privileges as Grêmio. The media hit him hard, and the coach demanded the utmost from all the players, including the stars. But Ronaldinho only had a year because the World Cup was coming in 2002, and coach Luis Felipe Scolari was analyzing all the main players in Brazil, and he dedicated himself a lot. Ronaldinho shone in 2002 for PSG, enchanting everyone who saw him play with his aggressive style of passing forward or dribbling towards goal. PSG coach Luis Fernandes said that Ronaldinho's first year had been magical. Everything he tried he got right. But that year PSG won the Intertoto Cup, an extinct competition that led to the UEFA Cup. The competition had 3 winners per year, including this would be the only title Ronaldinho would win for PSG. The closer the World Cup got, and the presence of the star was certain, Luis Fernandes noticed that Ronaldinho was getting more and more relaxed. He started to be late for training and arrived tired, but the coach did nothing. He preferred to wait for the World Cup to end and have a serious talk with him. In 2002, the World Cup in Japan and South Korea. Brazil was coming from a difficult qualifying campaign, and few people believed that it would be the year of the 5th title, but a team that has 4 World Cups cannot be underestimated. After all, that team had players like Ronaldo, Roberto Carlos, Cafu, Dida, Ronaldinho Gaúcho, and many other strong names that year. And for him, the World Cup was the realization of a dream. He wanted him to be happy with the ball at his feet. That was his enchanting style of play, and it stopped the world. And what about that goal against England in the quarterfinals, an anthological goal in the star's career? An anthological goal for all Brazilians. When they saw it, they were completely stunned by such quality, which you don't find every day. It was the star's best game at the World Cup, but 7 minutes later he was shown a red card. In the final against Germany, the world stopped to watch the 2 powerhouses fight it out for the title. The first half was tight, but in the second half Ronaldo Fenomeno swallowed up the Germans and Brazil won its 5th world title. That title elevated Ronaldinho to another level, no longer as a young soccer prospect, but as a star, and he would want to be treated that way from that moment on. The big question for the world was how long a small team like PSG would be able to keep Ronaldinho without losing to a big European team. The question itself provides the answer when he returned to Paris. After the World Cup, Ronaldinho's status changed, but for his coach Luis Fernandez, he was still just another ordinary player. He was late for training, and there were constant parties, but the coach ended up leaving. But Ronaldinho seems to resent him to this day. Asked about the relationship between the two, Ronaldinho replied years later, "Luis Fernandez? I don't remember that one." Ronaldinho increased his fame even more and became idolized by the PSG fans. More epic goals, more moves, and more assists after Fernandez left and coach Vahid Halilhodžić came in. One of his greatest moments was in the semi-finals of the 2002 and 2003 French Cups when he scored both goals in a 2-0 win over Bordeaux, one of which was a superb overhead kick that brought applause from the stadium and the usual laughter from the boy who had just done it. The problem was that the PSG team was too weak for such a huge star. In the final, the Parisians lost to Auxerre, and Ronaldinho ended another season without winning a title or a place in the Champions League. Dissatisfied, the Brazilian made it clear that he wanted to leave the club at the end of the season. The offers started coming in quickly, and only two clubs entered the final straight for the artist soccer: Manchester United and Barcelona. And the Catalan club had the privilege of signing the Brazilian for €30 million at one of the biggest clubs in the world. Ronaldinho was starting a new era in soccer, a new era in his career, and of course his presence on the pitch was already a unique event. And the fans were so enthusiastic that in the club stores, 7 out of every 10 shirts sold with the players. From here on, Ronaldinho's story intensifies until his peak at Barcelona. His famous moves, his relationship with Messi, and all the most splendid dribbles in soccer history. His smile seems to shine even brighter. His class increases, and little Dinho was now Barcelona's biggest star and would soon become the greatest player in the world. But that will be for another video. Comment if you want a part 2, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot, your subscription, and you're like, thank you very much to everyone who comments on the videos. You are incredible.